And it's all used to be factories here.
Used to be?
Yeah, it used to be. Not anymore. It's all empty now. It used to be heaving in Leicester. This building used to have 2-3 floors, all factories.
This is all just in the last couple of years?
All in the last couple of years. All the decisions I've made from the top.
And the point was, we just don't want to buy from Leicester anymore?
Correct.
Quite fair to say Leicester is on its knees.
Press pick up on some bad factories that were violating rights. It's dramatically shrunk the businesses.
This is the last remaining unit that you've got, right?
Yeah. This is the last mill that we've got.
There's a phrase they say here: Leicester used to clothe the world. Once upon a time, garments and textiles made in Leicester were to be found on high streets and in cupboards around the globe. Today, it's a shadow of its former self. On the face of it, it's just another story of British deindustrialisation, but look closer and there's more to it. This is a story about fast fashion, about the impact of Chinese retail juggernauts like Shein, and about what happens in the wake of a scandal. Social worker Elias Musa has been in the industry for decades. These days, he supports workers fighting for their rights. And today, he's taking me to meet a knitwear manufacturer.
If you want to sign in, I'll find stuff for you.
Our Fashion is relatively young, just 7 years old. They make dresses, jerseys and other knitted items for well-known high street brands. You might well have one of their items in your wardrobe, albeit with someone else's label on it.
These are Shimaseki flatbed knitting machines. They're made in Japan.
But it, like every other garment manufacturer, is finding it difficult.
I'd say right now it's stagnant.
Okay, stagnant.
Last couple of years, yeah.
Doesn't sound that great.
Ultimately, it stems from the brands sourcing overseas. I think the way the industry is now, I'd say it's quite fair to say Leicester is on its knees.
In its heyday, when Philip Green's Arcadia was ordering large volumes of clothes for Topshop and Miss Selfridge, Leicester really was the garment capital of Britain. But when Arcadia collapsed, the industry replaced those big orders with smaller volumes, becoming a hub for fast fashion.
Now it's turned into little units as well, pop-up little factories, 10 workers, 5 workers.
Compared with how many before?
Compared to 50, 60 workers per factory. Since we had the scandal, that's when the downfall began.
10,000 people could be working in slave-like conditions in textile factories.
You'll probably recall what he means by that scandal.
How much are you paid?
Yeah, I can't say that.
A flood of stories a few years ago about illegal workers, slave labour, pay routinely below the minimum wage.
He said, "You know, I can't give you minimum wage."
And dark factories, as they were called, much of the attention focusing on this building in the garment district. And on fast fashion brand Boohoo, whose alleged exploitation became front-page news during COVID.
Earlier this year, Boohoo cut ties with a number of factories in Leicester.
That was followed by an inquiry, criminal investigations, and, though Boohoo has committed to sourcing 1% of its clothing from Leicester, the vast majority of big-name brands have gone in favour of factories in North Africa and South Asia, where the glare of scrutiny is weaker, even if labour practices are the same or worse.
This is the front of it. You look at it, look how derelict, look. There's the machines up there.
Are they still making stuff here?
Yeah, they make stuff for cash and carry here.
So it's much smaller scale?
It's very, very, very small scale.
At this trade show, they're desperately trying to reclaim the city's heritage. One of its organisers, Jenny Holloway, fighting for the industry's survival. Despite those accounts of some dark factories still in operation, she says the exploitation of workers has now been rooted out.
I'm not saying that there weren't rogue traders, because there were. We had press pick up on some bad factories that were violating rights. They have long gone, those factories. So I'm not saying it was without cause, but I think it was the scale and the misrepresentation of that scale that was so damaging.
And what was the impact of all of that on this sector?
It's dramatically shrunk the businesses. There used to be 1,500 factories that were operating, creating 150,000 jobs in 2017. I know of about 100 factories that I would support.
There were 1,500 before.
There were 1,500,
There's now only 100.
Well, there's 100 that we know of.
It is a flabbergasting statistic, from 1,500 factories to just 100. 1,400 businesses with thousands of workers just gone in the space of a few years.
This is a great example, you know, something that we're quite proud of. It looks like a normal skirt.
Yeah.
It's actually a skort.
A skort?
Yes, so it's
shorts.
Yeah, short in the side of the skirt, but it's also knitted as one piece.
Tejas is the third generation of a textiles family. His firm once supplied the country's biggest brands. Now they're barely clinging on. All because those orders from the high street names have just dried up.
It's a Leicester specific thing, you know. I've spoken to brands in the past who, if I moved my factory 15 miles north into Loughborough, would be happy to work with me.
For real?
Yeah. But because I have an LE1, LE4 postcode, they don't want to work with me.
Big brands.
Big brands, you know, we're talking retailers that are, you know, making billions in profit. But they have this stigma about working with Leicester and, you know, there's unethical trade practices. My product is right. I'm an established business for over 30 years. Why don't you want to buy? Oh, it's because of your postcode. And that's, you know, off the record conversation with buyers from multiple brands. You know, Tej, we like you, we like your product, we like the way you do business. Company policy is not to work with you.
That's borne out by a new report from UKFT, Britain's fashion and textiles lobby group. It found that a staggering 95% of clothes companies have either trimmed or completely eliminated clothes manufacturers from the UK. Some 58% of brands by turnover now have an explicit policy not to source clothes from Britain. A couple of days after the trade fair, Tejas invites me to his family's factory to see the blowback to the scandal in person. They call it the Leicester effect. This is the last remaining unit that you've got, right?
Yeah. This is the last mill that we've got. We were in there, and there.
This used, in other words, to be one of Leicester's fashion hotspots. But on the other side of the road from Tejas is another empty plant. This firm, who declined to be identified, used to supply Marks & Spencer and Primark. The screen printing facilities here were second to none. Now there's only a few machines still running. The rest of the factory is, well, you can see for yourself, more silent than a tomb. Just 2-3 years ago, this was the single biggest production facility for dyeing textiles, essentially, not just in Leicester, but anywhere in the country around me. You can see these are the canisters that are used, that go into the machines, that create all of those amazing patterns. So, you know, here's one of them. But there are thousands, and this is many years' worth of work, a kind of library of different designs, most of which, I'm afraid, are going to be destroyed because there are no buyers right now, and right now there is no activity. And so all of the machinery around here, and there's millions of pounds worth of machines, are all eerily quiet. For the owner, who didn't want to go on camera, it's heartbreaking. The end of Leicester. The end of the city that clothed the world, whose machines defined the Industrial Revolution. This is the last of 5 printing machines, all state-of-the-art, worth more than £1 million each. The other 4 have been scrapped, and that may well be the fate of this one as well. While Leicester hogged the headlines in the heyday of fast fashion, its near extinction has barely been reported. Over the road, Tejas' new devices making skorts and exercise gear sit alongside newly abandoned machines. This would previously have been entirely occupied by all of the knitting machines, right?
We fitted 35 knitting machines in here.
Right. So this was a bustling,
yes,
kind of noisy place.
Oh, yeah. You know, it's it was very unique. You could tell by the sound which machine had stopped. You know, you learned that after everything, there's a different hum to each machine.
But this is all happening now, in the past few months.
The decision was made the end of last year, the beginning of this year. We thought we'd see how it starts off, and it started off fairly poorly, and then it's almost like
God, I hadn't realised it was quite so
Which
recent.
is why we don't like coming into this bit. It feels like we've been burgled. It feels like they've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left. You know, I grew up with this noise and these machines. You know, I used to sit with Dad, hand him parts to put on the machines, and now it's just an empty space that we've seen. And it hurts. It truly hurts.
That pain, felt across the sector, across the city, has been exacerbated by a new phenomenon, the rise of Chinese fast fashion brands Shein and Temu. Squeezed consumers turning to ultra-cheap clothes made in Chinese factories and delivered direct to UK households tax-free. That's thanks to a customs loophole called de minimis, which means individual packages sent here worth below a certain value don't pay tariffs. Donald Trump has promised to remove it in America. Here in Britain, the government has only said it'll do a review.
It is having an impact on our production. And I think the whole retail sector, or at least for clothing, they're feeling that pinch. And if we look at what Trump's done, he's just thinking more about his local economy because he can see the long-term effects.
You mean blocking some of those loopholes, like de minimis?
De minimis, yes. And I think that...
Should we be doing that here, do you think?
Yeah, I think it will make a huge difference. I think ultimately it's about a level playing field.
It's not all doom and gloom. There are still some factories left, some businesses still sending work to Leicester. But most brands still don't want to be associated with this place. For years, they squeezed the workers here until most of them eventually abandoned the city. If there is a light at the end of this tunnel, it feels further and further off. Ed Conway, Sky News in Leicester.